2 Corinthians chapter 4 and Hebrews chapter 11. As I mentioned last week, I'm trying to emphasize what we read in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18. As we lead into these special meetings next week, talking about missions, we want to emphasize this thought. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18, he says, "While we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal." And last Thursday, we talked about the invisible Jesus. And I want to just explain quickly how this ties to missions, because you understand Jesus dwells in that eternal and spiritual realm. He did make his entrance into the physical realm 2,000 years ago. I hope in the next few minutes he makes another entrance into the physical realm, calls us up to meet him in the clouds. However, the invisible Jesus that cannot currently be seen with the human eye, he's interested in people outside of Potchefstroom. You understand that? People, the old saying is out of sight, out of mind. And we tend to get short-sighted and think that God's interested in Potchefstroom and only Potchefstroom. But there's a vast world out there, almost 8 billion souls. And literally God only knows how many of them are truly saved. How many of them are, as Jesus put it, sheep without a shepherd. And it's so easy for us to lose sight of what we cannot see. And this is why we have a missions conference, we put the tables up at the missions fair to show you there's other places where real people need to hear the gospel. And it's just to remind us of those lost souls that we don't see all of the time. Now, in order to really be motivated to take the gospel all the way to the other side of the map, I think it's first and foremost important that you get your eyes turned upon Jesus. Last week, that's why we started there, the invisible Jesus. Today, I'm going to expand on that same thought, just expanding a little bit. Come to Hebrews chapter 11. And in this great chapter about faith, get verse 27. Faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. This is the great chapter if you want to remind yourself of what it means to walk by faith, what it means to have the unseen outlook. Here's a chapter filled with examples of people that had the unseen outlook. They were moved by faith, not by their feelings, not by their intellect, not by philosophy. They were moved by seeing the one who could not be seen. And let me show you an example. In this passage, we have several examples of Moses' life. In verse 27, for the sake of time, we'll just look at this one instance here. Verse 27, it says, "By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible." And that's the title of my lesson tonight, Seeing Him Who is Invisible. If you are to endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ, this is one thing that will be necessary, is to be able to see Him who is invisible. The only way you're going to do that is by faith, of course. But we have this example in the life of Moses, what it looks like to see Him who is invisible, how it's going to get you through the toughest moments of your life. The word endure, it means to undergo without giving in. You go through trouble without compromising. It means to remain firm while suffering. It means to continue in the same state, the same condition. We are commanded to endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. And therefore, as Hebrews chapter 2 says, we see Jesus, the captain of our salvation. He's leading God's army, and our eyes must be fixed on Him. Moses went up against, listen to this, the most powerful man in the world. You understand that? Pharaoh was the most powerful man in the world, and that man was ready to kill Moses. And yet we read here that he didn't fear that. He was able to endure all of the threats, all of the suffering, all of the complaining from his own crowd. His own people didn't think he could pull it off. And Moses was able to stay the course, to continue without compromising, to undergo without giving in, because he could see him who was invisible. So come back to the book of Exodus, and I just want to walk you through Moses' journey, if I can. Come to Exodus chapter 3, and we're going to go a bit quickly through this story, simply because I believe you're familiar with much of the history of it. But let's look at a few important things. Exodus chapter 3. We're going to look at verse 1 in a moment, but let me remind you of what happened in chapter 2. Moses tried to deliver his brethren. Remember that? He went down and he saw an Egyptian smiting one of his brothers. He killed the Egyptian, hit him in the sand. The next day, he sees two Jews fighting, and he goes and tries to break them up, and they say, "Who made you a deliverer and a judge?" And then they say, "Are you going to kill one of us and hide us in the sand, just like you did yesterday?" And Moses realized, what I did was seen. Be sure your sin will find you out. I mean, you think you got away with it. You think you buried it. You think nobody can see that sin. Somebody sees it. And Moses realized Pharaoh is going to come after me, because news of what I've done is going to travel to him. And it did. And Pharaoh was ready to kill him. And Moses runs out into the backside of the desert, and he sets up a whole new life. He is deathly afraid of Pharaoh. Now, a new Pharaoh comes to the throne in the process of time. And then Moses has figured, I've gone on with my life. Married a wife, I have kids. I tried that thing where I served God. I tried to be in the ministry. It didn't work. So he said, okay, well then that's out. And then chapter 3 happens. Verse 1, now Moses kept the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the backside of the desert and came to the mountain of God, even to Horeb. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. And he looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called unto him out of the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here am I. He takes his shoes off, and God's kind of saying, it's holy, but get comfortable. That's what you do, when you're going to stick around a while, you take your shoes off. And God says, I'm going to deliver the people of Israel, and by the way, I'm going to use you to do it. Now, the reason the Lord is using it, Moses actually wanted to look into the bush. Look a little deeper and go, now I see something happening here that's not an everyday thing. Let me look into that. A lot of the times we don't see God because we just don't look for Him. It's really that simple. We don't see Him who is invisible because we're just not looking there. We're always looking at the visible. So Moses is interested in the burning bush, but he wants to know, why is it like this? And then he hears God, and the conversation begins, and then he says, Moses, you're going to be the one. Moses' immediate reaction was, that cannot be. Rather than say, okay, God, if you said it, I believe it. That would be faith. But Moses was rather rattled with fear instead of stabilized by faith. Verse 11, Moses said unto God, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, and that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? There's no faith there. That's just fear. And in the back of his mind, don't you know, he's thinking, 40 years ago I tried this, God, and it completely failed. Well, that's because God didn't tell him to do that 40 years ago. God's telling him to do it now. And this next verse is incredibly important. Look at verse 12. And he said, this is God speaking to Moses, Certainly. Please underline that. Highlight it, circle it, do all three. Certainly, I will be with thee. Does that promise sound familiar? Doesn't that sound a little bit like the New Testament where he said, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the world"? Doesn't that sound like the promise where he says, "Be content with such things as ye have, for he hath said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee, so that you may boldly say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear what man shall do unto me. Certainly, I will be with thee." Now, you would like to think that Moses, this great man of faith, would say, "Well, amen. Lord, if you said you're going to be with me, one man plus God is a majority. We can take on the world." Pharaoh for who? Who is Pharaoh? Right? Why be afraid of Pharaoh if God's on your side? But Moses said, I don't even know your name. And he fixes that. And then in chapter 4, he says, but the Israelites aren't going to believe. And God says, okay, but here's some signs. That'll get their attention. I know that Jews require a sign. I made these people. Here's what you need. God will always give you the tools to get the job done, the job that he told you to do. Chapter 4, verse 12, God tells Moses, "Now therefore go, and I will be with thy mouth, and teach thee what thou shalt say." Moses was worried about, I'm not eloquent. I'm slow of speech. I don't talk so good. What's the promise? I will be with thy mouth. Why, that goes back to the original promise. Certainly I will be with thee. Moses scratched his head a little bit and thought on that and thought, man, miraculous ministry. God will show me what to say. I know his name. I have God instead of Pharaoh. Verse 13. And he said, "O my Lord, send, I pray thee, by the hand of him whom thou wilt send." God, that sounds great. Send somebody else. Still afraid. What more would you like for God to do? What more would you like for him to tell you? What more can he provide for you? Until it sinks in, he is right here with me. I do not need to be afraid of whatever that Pharaoh is in my life. That thing that is terrifying me, I can overcome that. Verse 14, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Moses. You know why? Because he wasn't motivated by faith. It was fear. And that brings us to chapter 5. Eventually Moses does. Now he has Aaron on board, his brother. And they go and tell the elders of Israel, listen, God has called us. We're going to lead you out. And the Israelites, as predicted, said, no, we doubt that. And he said, watch this. Threw the rod down, serpent, hand in, leprous, hand in, healed. And they went, ooh, we think you might be the one. And they're excited. Chapter 5, Moses marches into the court of Pharaoh and says, I've been called by God, the Lord God of the Hebrews has said, let my people go. I have a dream. Sorry, that's another thing. Let my people go. And Pharaoh's response is, chapter 5 and verse 2, who is the Lord? What are you talking about? You're the leader of a bunch of slaves and you think I'm going to listen to you? Who is the, you know what? You're probably with the union just trying to get these guys out of work. Tell you what, I'll fix that. I'll make the work lekker hard. We're going to make it even worse than before. Demand the same amount of bricks, but take away all the fixing so they can't get it done. And life gets even more difficult for the Hebrew people. So much so that the Jews, who were all excited to have a deliverer, now they go back to Moses and say, thanks a bunch, buddy. I mean, you got us all worked up that we're going to march out of Egypt all victorious. Let my people go. Go where? Go back to work. Chapter 5 and verse number 20. And they met Moses and Aaron, who stood in the way as they came forth from Pharaoh. And they said unto them, the Lord look upon you and judge. They're saying, God punish you for what you did. Because ye have made our savor to be abhorred in the eyes of Pharaoh and in the eyes of his servants, to put a sword in their hand to slay us. They said, Moses, man, you're killing us. You're killing us, Moses. Verse 22, and Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Lord, who come? Wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he hath done evil to this people. Neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. God, you said you were going to deliver them. I marched in there and I told Pharaoh what you told me to say. You didn't do it. God, what'd you do that for? You know what often happens and why we begin to doubt that God is with us? Right? Didn't Paul say, if God be for us, who can be against us? Right? You know why we start to doubt those things? It is because God doesn't fix the problem as fast as we think He should. God, you said that you would help me. He didn't say when. He just said He would. But God, you're not working on my schedule. He doesn't have to. That wasn't part of the contract. He commands, you obey. Finished and claude. The timing is up to Him. So God calms him down, chapter 6 and verse 1. Then the Lord said unto Moses, now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. He said, Moses, calm down, buddy. I'm just getting started. Man, you're not at the end of this thing. We're just getting going. You have no idea what I have in store for him. Chapter 6, verse 11. Chapter 6, verse 11. Go in, speak unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land. And Moses spake before the Lord, saying, behold, the children of Israel have not hearkened unto me. How then shall Pharaoh hear me, who am of uncircumcised lips? He's back to his excuse of not being an eloquent speaker. He said, listen, my own people aren't with me. How can I get Pharaoh to be on my side? You're asking me to do something, God, that I cannot do. Verse 13, and the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, and gave them a charge unto the children of Israel, and unto Pharaoh king of Egypt, to bring the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt. He said, Moses, listen, your fears have not changed the command. Go get the job done. Now at this point, right, Moses knows that it is God giving him this information, but do you see that he's still afraid? And the whole idea of him enduring, we call that into question at this point. We're not sure. If you're reading the Bible for the first time through, you get to this point of the story, you're not sure if Moses is going to keep on with it. Because it seems like he's making so many excuses, he's going to quit any moment. Chapter 6, verse 29, we read about Moses and Aaron and their family in the middle of chapter 6. You know why we read about that? You know why he puts those mundane details in there? Moses is just from another family of Israel. He's just another guy. He didn't come from some great line of prophets or anything. He's just another guy. And yet God calls people like this. In verse 29, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, I am the Lord, speak thou unto Pharaoh king of Egypt all that I say unto thee. And Moses said before the Lord, behold, I am of uncircumcised lips, and how shall Pharaoh hearken unto me? He's making excuses. He's afraid. I think I'm safe to say that he's wondering if he should even try this, because once he jumps in right here, he's picking a fight with Pharaoh. He already went in and said, please let my people go. No, get back to work. Done. And Moses is probably contemplating here, now if I go back in and say, hey, Pharaoh, let my people go, Pharaoh's going to take them as fighting words. And Moses has already run away from Pharaoh once. A different Pharaoh, but he's already done this one. This is where the rubber meets the road. So, Moses girds up the loins of his faith. Says, all right, here we go. And you know what some of you need to do? You just need to decide who you fear more, Pharaoh or God. And in order to make that decision, you need to clearly see the two. Your eyes can see Pharaoh. But you need those eyes of faith to see just how big your God is and what He is capable of doing with somebody that will completely obey. Moses did. Now, to move the story forward rapidly, chapter 7, 8, 9, into chapter 10. Here's the progression. Just watch up here quickly. Moses turned the water to blood. Now that's down on the ground, isn't it? Turn the water to blood. That's even below the ground. Water to blood. Boom, it happens. Next thing, call the frogs out. That's coming out of the water now onto the land. Frogs come out. Next one, slap the dust, turn it into lice, to hojas, to gnats. Boom. Now those are flying right around here. That comes out of the ground, flying right here. Next one, call the flies in. And they only afflict the Egyptians. They don't afflict the children of Israel. But those flies, they're bzzz up here. They didn't come from the ground, bzzz up here. Next one, you get into another chapter. Here comes this horrible disease on the cattle. And the cattle, those are the ones that attract the flies, by the way. But the cattle stand a little taller than, they're right up here, eye level with man. And then cattle start to die. And then the next thing he says, throw the ashes in the air, and the boils come down. Now you throw the ashes in the air, he said, put it up in the air. And the ashes, where it falls, a boil pops up on the man. And they're in horrible pain. And then he says, do this, call down hail out of heaven, and let the lightning hit the ground, run like fire on the ground. And now the Egyptians, you see what's happening? One plague after another, they're looking down, and then up, 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 and oh my goodness, here comes the hail, here comes the lightning. And then God says, all right, Moses, lift that rod up again, call for the locust. But the locusts come in with the east wind. So it's not just looking up. Now they're looking up and out at the horizon. You see what God's doing? He's trying to get everybody to look up. Hey, look who's doing this. Look up here. Look unto me, all ye ends of the earth, and be ye saved. Look up here. He says, okay. The locust didn't get your attention. Maybe this will. Escom, shut the lights off. And darkness in the land of Egypt. A darkness that could be felt. That's some deep darkness. The Israelites had light, but not the Egyptians. Load shedding, just one part of the town. Services. You say, what happened? Now you're not looking at the horizon. You're looking up at the sun, and the sun isn't even shining like it should. And that's where we pick up the story in chapter 10, verse 27. Let me fill in the blank just quickly. You know what's happening as these plagues are rolling in and rolling over the Egyptians? Each time Moses says, all right, we're going to do this. God told me to do this and do this. And Pharaoh would go, oh, that's horrible. Okay, we'll let you go. And then Moses would pray and the plague is over, and then Pharaoh would say, never mind. Moses would get all excited. Ooh, it's going to work. And it didn't. Ooh, it's going to work. And then it didn't. And then we get to chapter 10, verse 27. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. And Pharaoh said unto him, get thee from me, take heed to thyself, see my face no more, for in that day thou seest my face, thou shalt die. That's what Moses has been afraid of this whole time. He kept thinking, okay, we're going to get out of here. We're going to get out of here. We're going to make it out. We're going to make it out. And one time after another, it didn't work out. How many times have you tried to do something to get out of trouble and it just didn't work out and you just fell right back into the same problem and it feels like you'll never get rid of that problem? And the only way you're going to endure is if you take your eyes off the problem and put them on the one that you cannot see. You'll not endure unless you see the one who is invisible. Pharaoh has just threatened Moses. If I see you again, I'm going to kill you. Verse 29, Moses said, thou hast spoken well. I will see thy face again no more. You know why? Because chapter 11 happened. You know what the Lord told him in chapter 11? He said, Moses, let me remind you of something. You remember when I first called you to do this job? You remember what I said I would do? And Moses starts thinking back, going, well, you said you were going to deliver the people of Israel. He said, yes, but I told you I'd do it in a certain way. He says, what is that way? Let me show you that way. Come back to chapter 4. Chapter 4, verse 21. And the Lord said unto Moses, when thou goest to return into Egypt, see that thou do all those wonders before Pharaoh, which I have put in thine hand. but I will harden his heart that he shall not let the people go. And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, even my firstborn. And I say unto thee, Let my son go, that he may serve me. And if thou refuse to let him go, behold, I will slay thy son, even thy firstborn. God told Moses that's what it's going to come to. God never said the water to blood will get him out. God never said the flies will get him out. God never said the darkness will get him out. He said, this is what it's going to take. So if you're Moses and you're walking by faith, you know what you're doing? One miracle after another, you should be standing back going, okay, I know that it's going to take more time. I know this isn't going to be an easy, quick fix. Pharaoh's not going to go away easy. Your problems will not go away easy. And once you accept that truth, rather than running as soon as the trouble starts, rather than being afraid every time Pharaoh threatens you, you rather turn your eyes upon the Lord and say, Lord, I'm waiting for you to fulfill this promise. You've said that you will fix this in a certain way. And until we get to that big climactic moment, I'm just going to keep watching you do the little things and let it build and let it build. God, I'm happy to watch you work out the story of my life in a way that only you can. And no matter what Pharaoh does, no matter how many times he changes his mind, no matter how many times he discourages and disappoints me, I'm not going to quit because my eyes are not on Pharaoh. My hope is not that Pharaoh changes. My hope, God, is that you will do what you said you would. So I'm going to keep looking at you. And then in chapter 11, God says, now Moses, you remember what I told you was going to happen? You go tell Pharaoh, enough's enough. Chinuch is chinuch. We've reached the end. So now the Egyptian eyes are turned upward. The sun has been shut off. And God says, if that didn't get your attention, you need to look all the way up here to the throne of God because I have power to kill and to make alive. The firstborn are going to die. Anybody that isn't under the blood, the firstborn are going to die. And Moses, when God tells him, go tell Pharaoh that the firstborn are going to die, in Moses' mind he goes, aha, this is what God said would do it. This is where he said it would all come together. I can see my life coming together. I can see the calling of God coming together. And now when Pharaoh says, hey buddy, you're threatening my son? You're threatening my firstborn? Get out of here, I'm going to kill you. Moses says, don't worry. You're never going to see me again. Drops the mic. And he walks out of the room on that. And he forsook Egypt. And he wasn't afraid. Even though the most powerful man in the world just said, I'm going to kill you the next time I see you. Moses walks out without a fear. What happened? Slowly but slowly, Moses' faith was built up by watching God work day by day, event by event, until the Word of God came to pass exactly the way He said. This is why, guys, we walk by faith and not by sight. We hang on to our Bible and we say, God, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know that you will do what you said you will do. So, God, I can't see you, but I know what you said. You said, certainly, I will be with thee. So let Pharaoh say what he wants. You said you'll be with me. What did Jesus tell you? I'll be with thee to the end of the world. What did he say? I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. What did he say? I stand at the door and knock. If you hear my voice and open the door, I'll come in. And I'll sup with you and you with me. You believe that? You believe that tonight? You know what Jesus told his disciples right before he died? He said, guys, I'm going to go die, but when I rise again on the third day, like I told you I would, I'll see you in Galilee. He said, I will see you. You'll see me in Galilee. Jesus dies. You know what the disciples do? Instead of going to Galilee, they stay down in Jerusalem. And the Bible says, for fear, they gathered together in the upper room. Because of what they just saw happen in Jerusalem, they thought Galilee can't happen because the most powerful man in the world, Caesar, authorized the killing of our master. How can we possibly overcome this? And when Jesus rises up, he tells that angel, you tell those women, go tell those cowardly Christians, I told them I'd see them in Galilee. And you're not going to see me here in Jerusalem. You're going to see me in Galilee. You know why you don't see him? You're not looking in the right place. You're hanging out in that place of fear. That's not where he told you to find him. He said, you'll see me in Galilee. You want to see him? Then you grab a hold of one of his promises and you say, Lord, everything in my life says I should be afraid. My natural senses, my intellect says I should be afraid, I should be worried, I should be panicked, I should be depressed. But you said I should be filled with joy and I should have a peace that passes all understanding. You said that you're not only with me, but you're in me and you'll never leave me. Imagine if we fully grasped that promise tonight and walked out of the building tonight knowing he's right here with me and he's never going to leave me and he's never going to stop loving me. Let Pharaoh say what he wants. I've seen God do too many things to stop trusting him now. And that's what allows you to endure. Because you can see the one who is invisible. You see him through his promise. He said, I'll be with thee. So I believe it. He'll be with me to the end of the world. So I'll just keep walking as far as he wants to take me. Do you see how missions kind of gets drawn into that? If he calls me to a land far, far away, he'll be with me there. You say, how could I possibly do that? Why would God call me? I'm not fit to do that. That's exactly what Moses said. Say, well, he wouldn't do that. I'm too old. Moses was 80. So there's all your excuses. But Moses just kept on going because he had his eyes on the one that could not be seen. Let's stand if you would. And Armand, if you can come, we'll sing maybe 2 songs and then let you guys get to the house. And then Armand, after you lead these couple songs, we'll